everybody. Welcome to the Philip Merrill College of Journalism. We're so pleased to have you here to talk about this really important and really quite fascinating topic tonight, the impact of sports injuries on individuals and on sports and journalism and all of that. The Shirley Povich Center for Sports Journalism has become, over the last several years, a wonderful place for people in sports, in journalism, in other scientific disciplines, to get together and have very serious conversations about the impact of sports in society and to train our journalists here in this building how to better cover not only play-by-play and games and personalities, but also the other issues that sports journalists are going to have to cover with increasing frequency. I was not a gifted athlete as a young person. My sister was. She had a career-ending ACL injury. She was a college basketball player. Her daughter was a college volleyball player who had ended up with 2 ripped ACLs and 4 concussions until that ended her career. Her son, my nephew, had a career-ending college football concussion that they said that was it. This issue really resonates with me. You know, at the time, back in the day when I was your age, if you had an injury like this, you knew it was going to end your career. And that was sad enough. But increasingly, parents and other retired athletes are understanding that the impact of these injuries can have much, much longer impacts and very, very serious repercussions. I'm so delighted to have these folks here talking about this tonight. We are going to work, we have Professor Hatfield in the back from the kinesiology department. Merrill College is really getting started with the Sports Povich Center and some of our professors here to talk about what we can do with our research agenda, both on campus as far as sciences go, kinesiology, journalism, the intersection, about how we might be able to do some research in this topic because we think there is a need for it, and we would really like to jointly play a major role in investigating this, both from an information standpoint and a public health standpoint. So welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for our panelists for joining us this evening, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. George?
Thank you, Dean. Applause, welcome. We really appreciate the Dean appearing this evening. Before we start, I'd like to thank the Povich coordinator, Beth Meacham, for making all this possible, and welcome the new Merrill College Communications Director, David Ottolini. David is he's here, and a friend of mine, a former Redskin, and very active in the National Football League Players Association, Ray Schonke. Ray. And I also would like to introduce our panel now. And to my left, Dr. Stephen Haas, a retired physician for the Wizards, Capitals, Nationals, and the former medical director for the NFL Player Benefits. Dr. Haas. And you can applaud too. And I should have noted the personal physician for Michael Jordan, who, if you don't know, is celebrating his 50th birthday this month. Next to Dr. Haas is Mark Hyman, who's an author of a number of sports books about children and how important that is, the latest being Until It Hurts, and he's also an adjunct professor at George Washington University. Next is Sean Sansiveri, the staff counsel for the National Football League Players Association. Sean? Next is a Povich Center board member, good friend, WESPN 980 commentator, as well as Comcast SportsNet, Rick Doc Walker. Next to Rick is Scott Hallenbeck, the Executive Director of USA Football, which runs football for kids in this country. So we have a late guest who will be here momentarily. She's getting out of class, Monica McNutt, who is a graduate student here at the University of Maryland and a graduate of Georgetown University, where she was an all-Big East basketball player. So the first thing I'd like to start off with is throw a question for all the panelists to answer is, do we have a future of football in this country, Dr. Haas?
Yes.
In 30 seconds.
Yes. I think it will gradually change in some dimensions, but I think there is a future. I think that it will continue and it will flourish, but it's going to be a long, slow, and complex process to sort out many of the issues that we're talking about tonight.
Mark?
Do I really have just 30 seconds, George?
No, that was sort of a failed joke.
Okay. I've just completed working on a book with Robert Cantu, the neurosurgeon and consultant to the NFL and other leagues, about this issue as it pertains to kids. And Dr. Cantu's mantra is, no head trauma is good head trauma, particularly as that applies to kids. And his view is, as it pertains to football, that reducing head trauma between games would be plan B. And anything that we can do to pull back on full contact drills between games would be a helpful step. But plan A would be to eliminate tackle football for kids under 14 and replace that with flag football until kids reach an age where physiologically they're ready for the demands of tackle football.
Yeah, I think absolutely there's a future for it, and I think the simplest answer is that it'll exist in a form where there's a culture of accountability, a culture of safety, and the research will become, if it's not already, such a priority that will hopefully be able to ultimately impact the outcomes of what may be, to some level, an inherently dangerous game, or in our instance, an inherently dangerous workplace.
The game will survive now that the people in charge are no longer lying to the participants. And this game was based on being vulgar, your manhood being challenged. The men who taught it were teaching it in a hateful sense, that the only way you could survive was to attack. And the more physical you were, the more you were promoted. And if you weren't, it was a derogatory sense that challenged your manhood. And everything is based on testosterone in football. And it was by adults who had children doing this. And as that changes, the culture on it, then the game then can be sophisticated. It can still be primal at times, but it was such overkill. I mean, we had adults that had children taking salt tablets and not drinking any water for hours, grown men. So people that were supposed to be intelligent, that you trusted, were ill-informed, Neanderthal, ignorant. And as you look at all these factors, as a result, that's what happened to us. And I think the next generation will be much better off as a result. Come on, Ray. As a result, because now we're approaching this thing sensibly.
How do you follow that up?
Scott, you have a big responsibility. I mean, your organization oversees lots and lots of kids, playing, youth football.
As Doc said, I mean, the game is evolving already. Okay, we're already seeing a lot of evolution. I think and progress is being made. And some people are even arguing that the game is safer today than it's been in a long time because of the changes, because of the awareness around concussion. And you're right, USA Football, but all of us together, and arguably all the other governing bodies involved in sports generally, have a responsibility to better educate. The football experts and the medical experts agree on a couple things. One is education first and foremost. We have to do a better job of educating coaches, parents, and players. Football, interestingly enough, is one of the few, if not the only sports that isn't driven by an elite travel team mentality. So it also means that we don't have direct access to the parents. My kids, I have a 17-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old son, freshman and junior, and son plays football and lacrosse, daughter plays basketball and lacrosse. And the fact is, lacrosse, they have direct access to me. I have to pay a membership fee to be associated with U.S. Lacrosse. You don't have to do that in football. So there's challenges getting to the parents and educating them. So yeah, we have new programs I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, but things called Heads Up Football, we're getting back to making sure that coaches are teaching the game properly, are making sure that we're getting back to the proper fundamentals of the sport, making sure it's fun. I mean, Les Miles at LSU talks about youth football in particular needs to be fundamentals and fun. That's what it needs to be, because otherwise kids are going to get burned out and not even see the light of day at high school.
Scott, and we'll start with you and come back this way. How do you respond to the President Obama saying that if he had a son, he would have to think twice about letting his son play football? How do you respond to that? Because a lot of parents feel that way.
Right, understandably. And I start with saying I'm a parent, first and foremost. And I have a son who's 16 years old, and I coached him up through youth football. And, you know, not more than 5, 6, 7 years ago, we were running into some of these same things that Doc's talking about. Fortunately, not the salt tablets and all of that, but the idea of coaches, frankly, not knowing what they're doing. It's that simple. I mean, I talk to so many high school coaches, so many former players, and often they're concerned about having their kids play isn't necessarily about the broad safety issues, which still are, medical community is just scratching the surface. It's about the fear of the coaches. They have no confidence in the coaches. So our fundamental responsibility is to do a better job of educating coaches, and to do that we have to put standards in place. There's never been standards in youth football. So my short answer is, first of all, I can appreciate the concern. I have a child who plays as well. Make sure that you look at who's coaching your child, and if they're actually open to a certification program and learning how to teach fundamentals, that they're not scrimmaging for 2 hours at a time, that they're reducing helmet contacts. I know this is something that's very important to Dr. Cantu. Maybe it's plan B or even C, but the bottom line is reducing helmet contacts is critical. There's a whole series of things that have to be done, including proper equipment fitting and a series of other things. But bottom line is this game can be played better and safer as long as we get down to setting new standards and best practices.
Now, Rick, you had 2 sons who played football, and here at the University of Maryland as well as in high school.
2 played here, yeah. 2. One graduated, one still here, and the other played in high school. The interesting note that Safe Kids USA in 2009 produced that by age 13, 70% of kids drop out of youth sports for 3 reasons: adults, coaches, and parents. Well, all you have to do is have coached youth sports to recognize this. None of my kids who all played football ever played until they went to high school, because I couldn't coach it, because I was working as a broadcaster. And I didn't trust anyone that I knew well enough to give them my kids at a young age. Yet I played at 9, and I had to play against 14-year-olds, which was ridiculous because of these weight restrictions they have against big kids, but they don't have them against smaller kids. So it's okay to be 35 pounds and get killed, but you can't be 200 pounds. They don't let you participate. Poor Ray played without a helmet and a face mask for so long that obviously you can see the effect. Yeah, right, because he didn't have a face
But
mask.
I'm pleased you found your way to this arena.
But what USA, what they're doing is got to be the benchmark for football, in that Joe Sixpack can't coach my kids. You guy can't go read a book about Lombardi, then go out and start yelling at the kids. The more they yell, the less they know. It's a fundamental game. I'm from the tag and flag and everything generation, because we didn't have any electronic toys. So these kids have no balance because they never go outside. And so I played all 5 sports. Most of my generation played all 5. These kids now specialize in playing one, which adds stress to that particular body that they stress with, and they have no fundamentals. I coach youth. I've coached high school in this area. When I meet a kid and he's in the 9th grade, he can't catch. He doesn't know how to run a route. We got to do that at 6, because they're in with their thumbs. All they move is their thumbs. So then these overzealous parents who want to relive their failed childhoods take these kids out and they push them into things, and they're ill-advised to participate. So they get hurt because their bodies are not functional enough to be an athlete yet. And you should stick to soccer. I love soccer for kids. Generating the feet, tennis, anything other than the big 3 sports I think makes sense.
Monica McNutt has joined us. Yes, you're up.
I'll go next. I think these guys hit the points, the key points on the head. I mean, I think education is a huge piece of it, and it's not just education for the coaches, for the trainers, for medical staff, whoever's involved at that level. I wish we had trainers and medical staff involved at that level more often. But it's also for the parents to make informed decisions about whether or not they ultimately allow their child to engage in a sport such as this. I also think it's similar on the credentialing piece or the certification piece. I mean, efforts need to be made to ensure that the appropriate protocols and practices are in place all across, whether it's concussion evaluation and management, return to play protocols, or whether it's looking at a doctor's background, a trainer's background, a coach's background to make sure that they have the appropriate education and training. And I think one potential piece that would lend itself to progress in this is informatics platforms. I mean, taking advantage of what we have now. I mean, a lot of, I think WebMD, for example, probably the most consumer-friendly version, probably has 170 million clicks. I think it's a week. I could be off on that. Why isn't there a concussion education piece on something like that? We need to look at more traditional methods of getting this sort of information out, not only to the parents, to the athletes, but to the providers themselves, so that the doctor in the small town actually knows how to treat a sports-related injury.
Mark, you wrote a book and wrote several articles for the New York Times about parents taking their children to doctors and having doctors tell them, well, your child is injured, he or she should not play, and then they go shopping for doctors who will say, let the kid can play. Talk about that.
Yes. You know, it's in our DNA, George. We love watching our kids play sports and excelling in sports and living vicariously through them. I think some of us have that reined in better than others, but it's a continuum. I think we all have the potential to kind of lose perspective about what sports is and what it offers to our kids. And when we get very focused on youth sports as kind of a career path, as a means to an end, as a way to get your kids through college or even playing center field for the Nationals, that's when we're vulnerable. And that's when you see kids at risk physically and emotionally. You know, you talk about, I think Doc said 70% of kids by age 13 have dropped out of organized youth sports. That's why. Because sports for kids, to a great extent, reflects our needs, our emotional needs as adults, and the needs of kids have become, in many ways, secondary. And that's a problem. You know, if Walmart was driving away 70% of its customers every day, they'd figure something else out. That would not continue. But in youth sports, we continue down this path that reflects what we as the parents really love and enjoy about sports, sometimes, not always, but sometimes at the expense of kids.
Dr. Haas, in the New York Times today, there's a story that the NFL is going to expand concussion efforts during games with an independent neurologist. Give me your thoughts on that.
Short questions with long answers.
This is a long question.
And just for by the way, for the students that are here, I would commend you to Judy Batista's reporting in the New York Times. She's really good, at least from a medical point of view. I can't speak to her technical expertise in journalism, but she's a good source of medical writing in the popular media. The New York Times it's a paper thing that comes. Some of you may be familiar with it, but they have, yeah. The question, I'll deviate a little bit, but to answer your question, having a symposium on the sidelines at a football game doesn't work too well. I think and it takes a special experience to be able to perform as a team physician that doesn't have a lot to do with your medical expertise. At least a big part of it is. Neurologists, by nature, by interest, for instance, they tend to be quite cerebral. It's a very sophisticated field. What they do is conducted in very quiet circumstances. They're not in emergency rooms, they're not in surgery, et cetera, et cetera. Now you're going to take a neurologist, put him on the sidelines in a playoff game with 85,000 people going crazy. The coaches are going nuts. The players are going nuts. The star player, the critical point of the game, gets hurt and comes there. You go out on the field or whatever. If they're not used to working in this type of a situation with acute trauma and with that setting, they're going to have difficulty, and it's going to cause a lot of controversy. On the other hand, you can't have a panel of experts running out there. So just at a very elemental form, it sounds good. You're going to have all these experts and all these geniuses, and everybody's going to be out there and make instant decisions that are going to be perfect as far as who plays. Then you get into the stuff that you heard about when Mr. Griffin got hurt, like who told who he could go in the game.
That's my next question.
All
You're
that.
Knocking my stuff down.
I read the book, yeah. And you can see the confusion that reigns there. The alternative is to turn football into a 12-hour game, and that's probably not going to work too well either. It's not as easy as it looks. I would like Dr. Cantu, I know, is a colleague, very good person. He is neutral in what he's doing. He's not an advocate because of a special interest outside of the science involved. He has a tough job. What pervades all of this is there is absolutely nothing in the medical literature of any substance about repetitive mild brain trauma, which is what these concussions are. There's great stuff about skull fractures, about hemorrhages, blood clots, big deal one-shot injuries, military situation, car accidents, and all that. There is nothing in the medical literature about repetitive mild brain trauma. Therefore, it must start with the kids, and it must be conservative about that. But nobody, maybe other than Doc, nobody, did you walk up and knock on the door at the Redskins and say, I think I'd like to learn how to play football. It looks like it would be fun. No, you played when you were 7, 9, through blah, blah, and played. Head injuries in kids may well be totally different than in adults. I mean, look at juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, juvenile diabetes, juvenile femur fractures. They are totally different in kids than they are, in adults. So in trying to make conclusions from these various pieces of information that come out in the studies that are being done, you have to be careful of the interpretation, because you may well not be drawing the proper conclusions from what you see. All this work that's done in some of these autopsy studies, etc. Did those changes happen because the kids got hit in the head, or because it was adults? Or was it because they had a one-shot hit from a bar stool sometime when they were in college?
Which leads me to Monica, who might be the youngest person on this panel.
Yeah.
I guess. A year ago, she's playing basketball for Georgetown University. And what we've been talking about, did you ever get hurt and just continue playing even though you knew this was going to damage you as a person and your career because you felt it was the right thing to do?
No, I don't think I was ever in that dire of a situation. Going into my junior year, I had a partial tear in my labrum, which is the muscle in your shoulder. And I remember our assistant coach saying, oh, no, she can't be hurt. Not that she can't be hurt. So we see our doctors on campus, go with the trainer, get the x-rays. And the doctor said, he said, we could do surgery, but if you were my kid, I wouldn't do it. Like, if you can deal with it, we can deal with it. We'll get you a customized brace. So that became my thing my last 2 years of college. I played in a brace. Now that I'm a year out and my shoulder still bothers me, I wonder just a little bit. And I think I only wonder a little because I had a blast my last 2 years. So the reward for me outweighed a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of extra stim, a little extra ice after practice. Had it been something more serious, I think, and I hate to say this, but I think females do a little bit of a better job doing this. I would have had to step back and really look because I knew come May 2011, that was it for me. There wasn't a six-figure contract waiting at the end.
There was a spot in the University of Maryland.
There you go,
in
the graduate school, absolutely. So I think, but I've also been told on a number of occasions, it takes a very mature kid and a very special set of parents to understand that. Fortunately, my parents never did the vicariously living through me thing. It was always about my health. It was always about the goal at the end, which was to get a degree for free, and that's what happened. So I didn't deal with some of the pressures that some of my counterparts dealt with in terms of I have to play, there's something on the end of this for everybody else. But I think you really have to be true to yourself in that sense. And I think you hear that argument, are you injured or are you hurt? I think kids need to know it's okay to be hurt. Your body's real. You know, if you've got to sit out for a couple weeks or however long it is to come back and recover, in the long run, you know, you're doing something for yourself. Your body's going to be with you through the rest of your life. Your career is going to end.
Were your parents supportive when you were injured?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think in high school I had a stress fracture, missed a couple games. I think I actually started my shoulder issues in high school as well. And I remember crying to my dad about missing like 3 games with a stress fracture in my foot. And he's like, you got to look at the big picture. So my parents were always incredibly reasonable about it all.
Okay. Scott?
Well, I think that's why it's so...
Yeah, we have Ray.
Yeah, and I appreciate the answers, but I was very curious, being with Steve, if we're looking at a professional situation, not on a college level or high school, but on a professional situation, where we're now looking at neurologists making the call, and you're saying it's very difficult to make that call. Who has the ultimate decision? Is it you, or is it the coach? And I'm going to give you an example. Harold McClinton, and Stan Levine, who several people would know, was just an outstanding doctor. And he went out on the field, and we were playing the Cowboys. And he came back and he said, Harold has a concussion. He needs to come off the field. He went to his backup, who was Rusty Tillman. He said, Rusty, you got to go out there. And Rusty said, I don't go out unless he's carried out. Stan comes down screaming at me, saying, what the hell's wrong with you guys? This guy's got a concussion. He needs to come out of the game. I said, Coach, doesn't work that way. Rusty doesn't go out unless he's carried out. That's the rule we have played. Now, you're now the doctor. And you go to the coach and say, do you have the right to say, hey, he comes off, or you tell the coach and say, I think he has a concussion, he needs to come out. Coach, you make that decision. And the coach then, he's liable because you said he has a concussion, Harold plays, he plays well, he doesn't play well. And so what I'm looking for is who's going to have the ultimate decision from these neurologists that the league is now suggesting take place.
The doctor or the coach?
It may be helpful to give a little more insight into actually, the Times got it wrong. It's not a neurologist on the sideline, independent neurologist. It's actually what's termed as a sideline concussion expert, which would be a neurologist, neurosurgeon, or emergency room physician.
If he's an expert.
Yeah, with documented experience in the treatment of acute head injuries for the sole purpose of identifying mechanisms of injuries or symptoms that warrant further evaluation and overseeing the entire concussion protocol. So it wouldn't be the neurologist, the neurosurgeon, the emergency room physician actually even conducting the sideline examination. It would still fall under the purview of the team physician. However, this added set of eyes, independent of either club, so not allowing competitive considerations to overcome health and safety concerns, would be there to oversee the process to make sure.
The bottom line on everything is to Shanahan let him play. I mean, we're talking RG3. If Andrew says to Shanahan, Coach Shanahan, I don't know about this, and he goes back in and he winds up on the operating table.
And that speaks especially to the governing protocols for the management and evaluation of concussions, which, for instance, we've proposed a comprehensive document that communicates to the medical community at large, to the staffs, to the players, to the coaches, the standards in which are being applied to protect players. Right now there's a memo that is not comprehensive. It's circulated once a year. The 2012 version was actually the 2011 version, and that needs to be documented, comprehensive, and circulated to the medical community at large, similar to what the NHL has tried to do.
Yeah,
Okay,
Steve, again, you're the player, and you want to play. Okay, I know you're there to protect the player, but you want to play. I don't want to come out, Doc, I'm okay. You say, I think you have a concussion, you need to get out of here. And you go to the coach. Now, what happens there? I mean, who's making the calls?
Well, there's a step before that, which I think is critical. I mean, you hear that the Players Association proposes one thing, the league, there's negotiations. Unfortunately, it's such a hot issue and a contentious issue that goes way beyond medicine. It's tied into a lot of other issues. So that's part of the reason it's going to take an extra length of time to get all this sorted out beyond the pure science. The answer to your question is simple. You don't take the job as a team physician unless you absolutely have the last word on medical decisions. You should not be the team physician for the Washington Redskins if you suggest that maybe it'd be better if this player didn't play, or I don't really think this player would play, and the coach decides, okay, I heard you, go on and play if you feel okay. I don't say that as a direct answer to your question about Mr. Griffin, but it's fairly simple in that respect. And if you have these other people, as you mentioned, whoever they are, consultants with you, that funnels to the team physician who then makes his decision, looks at the player or her decision. For instance, in the case of the Pittsburgh Steelers, one of our residents, Robin West, is one of their physicians who's been a great team physician, and it's been very interesting how well she's integrated into the very macho world of professional football as a female team physician. Excuse the digression. Anyway, you shouldn't take the job unless you have the last word.
Scott, you had a point to make.
Well, this is the answer to this question does trickle down, right? So it trickles down to the high school level, trickles down to the youth level. Parents are all paying attention to who's making the decision, how's that going to work. And I really struggle from, again, my view of the world, the amateur side, and particularly the youth and high school side, because for whatever reason, we haven't been able to separate the reality that is professional. And there's it's a huge business, but there's a union and there's a league, and they're working things out, and they have all the best physicians, and they're adding more and more of them to the sidelines, as the doctor suggested. At some point, we got to separate the professional, because he's now more than ever. We were based in Indianapolis. I did a ton of stuff at the Combine with a lot of the NFL coaches and the players. These players know what they're walking into. It's no more, hey, we think we don't know, and all this, because they know what they're walking into. They're signing on the dotted line. They're signing up for the multi-million-dollar deal. It's the high school in particular, and the youth kids, but arguably the college kids as well. Certainly most of them. That we got to figure out what the answer to these questions are. Who's going to make that decision? Because
they're setting the standard. I mean, this is the
I
standard
hope
that
so.
trickle down to you. So if it's going to happen at the highest level, and that is, that everybody looks to, then it certainly should come down.
But what I'm saying is I also think, and we work closely with the NCAA and the High School Federation, these groups, they need to look at these issues on their own, regardless of what happens. Certainly you should consider what happens to the NFL at the union level, the professional level, but they should already be examining this. You shouldn't wait for in my opinion, this is just my personal opinion, we should not be waiting for what they decide. That is a whole different level.
Scott, do they have sufficient medical supervision on the high school level down from what you can see?
I mean, define sufficient, they don't. I mean, apparently I was originally under the impression that most high schools, in fact, had an athletic trainer on the sideline. What I've learned is from the National Athletic Trainers Association, it's 40%. It's nowhere near enough. I mean, you could 100% is what's necessary, and as mentioned, in an ideal world, you'd have it at the youth level as well. Now, let's also make sure we're clear that a concussion is incredibly hard to diagnose. One of the critical elements of what we call heads-up football is the fact that we are training a player safety coach in every single league. This is a coach that now has to be on the side of safety, not the medical side. We're never setting someone up to make medical decisions, by no means. But someone who has to understand equipment fitting, concussion recognition and response, and it's just the identification of signs and symptoms, as well as what we call heads-up tackling. They have to actually engage the parents and the players the week beginning of a football season. They have to actually teach the parents how to properly fit equipment. They have to teach them about recognition and response. It's all CDC materials. It's the only thing right now that's consistent. The only thing that we have in all this big discussions that seems to be consistent is what the CDC is saying. That's unfortunate, but at least we have something. So the NFL uses it, the NCAA uses it, high school use it, youth use it across all sports. So you got to educate the parents, because now the parents are the ones who have to understand a headache might be more than a headache. And concussions show up 24, 48, 72 hours later. At the youth and high school and arguably even college level, they're going to be with the parent more often than they're going to be with the coach. And yet we're putting all this emphasis and responsibility on the coach. We need to re-engage parents. They have to take responsibility, get away from trying to live vicariously through their kids and actually take responsibility for their health first and foremost and for their welfare. And if they want them to succeed in the sport, then they have to understand that they have to be part of their success. And that largely includes the safety side.
Rick, you played professionally for 10 years. You went to UCLA, played there, and you had two sons who played college football as well as high school football. Was there a time where you felt that your son should not have been out there?
No, because Austin made a tackle against Clemson a couple years back, and I was doing the game. His helmet flew off, and he made the tackle with no helmet. And if it's me watching Ray make that tackle, I'm screaming. I'm like, yes. When I saw him do it, I'm like, well, first of all, he's a fool. And my broadcast partner, Steve Martin, I said he took after his mother, because there's no way that I'm going to do that. But yet I understood the craze he was in, because he was a lunatic. Because his focus, when you play special teams, if you're a parent and your kid plays special teams, that will challenge your love for the game or not. That's why I'm happy they made the moves they did in the NFL, because that was suicidal. I got knocked out in my rookie year against Green Bay. Mike McCoy from Notre Dame was in the wedge, and I just tried to run right through the guy. He was about 325. That didn't work out. And when I came conscious, it was about 4 minutes to go in the game. And so, but my mom wasn't at the game. If that's your kid, you look at it, you feel different about it. But I knew he loved the game. There's more pluses than minuses in playing football. Take professional out of it. It's just that I want guys that play the game in society, running things. I want them being teachers and cops and doctors and lawyers because of what they go through. So I think it's worth it. To question about the physician, the neurologist, he has no chance of succeeding with that plan. If he's not part of a medevac unit, it's going to go so fast and furious. And if it's a power coach of the 32 teams, there's about 4 of them, that nobody tells him what to do. And if you're one of those 4 teams, that guy has no chance of succeeding telling that coach, this guy can't go back in the game. It's
Sean,
window dressing.
What do you think?
Well, what about the Schaub, the Vic, the Chris Steelman, the Colt McCoy, the instances where the guy clearly, the 8 and 80 rule, 8 million folks on TV, 80,000 in the stands, all knew the guy had a concussion, but he was never evaluated. If a sideline concussion expert says that guy needs to be evaluated because that's his sole purpose for being on the sideline, I dare that physician not to review him.
Whether he goes. I have the power.
And I agree on that. And that speaks to the protocols and practices that govern the overall.
I should also point out to the audience here that in many cases, and I don't have a specific number, the physicians or the doctor group pays the team for the privilege of being the team doctor. Mm-hmm. And it's, it puts the doctor in a very precarious position. I mean, because of the publicity surrounding, that role. I know you never did it, and I'll say that. You never did it. And that puts the doctors in a tough role. And I should also say, since you're here and you represent the National Football League Players Association, at least 2,000 or 3,000 former players have filed there are class action suits against the league, and these are people who had great careers, nothing wrong with them, yet they've filed litigation, and that's stunning to those of us who follow the game.
Yeah, and I'll take that one first, and then I'd like to jump back to the protocols in place. But the Players Association is not party to the litigation. We're not involved in the litigation. Obviously, we're interested in it, and we do have a policy of not commenting on ongoing litigation. But at this point, we're supportive of our members, our former members, and that's really our position.
Doc, are you part of that?
No, I'm workman comp issues. I'm not involved in it.
That's a big issue right there.
Yeah, it's a big issue, but a lot of people involved in it. You can't right all the wrongs.
Yeah.
You just can't. But yet, the point that I think Ray's making, that I want everybody here, that's non-participants, to get, is that you can have all the brain power on the sidelines possible. That guy, unless he's either got to be ex-military or medevac trained, in the middle of that quarter, when that happens and those crowd is going nuts and that coach looks him in the eyes, can he go? Do you have the stones to say no? And if you put him back in, then I'm going to go. I'm taking you down because this guy would be injured more so. Who's going to do that? Not on the payroll guy's not going to do it. So the independent now, but is he, as you mentioned, is he trained for that moment in a home game to make that decision? Man, I just don't think they are.
There's an example. Vince Lombardi, whom everybody admires and respects.
Don't go into his imitation of him. Okay, do me a favor. Okay, we've had that for you. Not enough police on campus to deal with it.
There's a football game. We're playing the Falcons anyway. It's halftime. It's a pre-exhibition. And I'm listening to the doctor talking to Lombardi. And the doctor's saying, I think the guy has a broken ankle. Lombardi says, he's got to play the second half. He said, Doc, but the doc says, no, he can't play. And Lombardi said, yes, he can play. And he says, no, he can't. The doc, his name is Dr. Resta, walks in, grabs the guy, and pulls him from the game. Next week, they fired the doctor.
Right.
Okay, so that's where you talk about power. Now, I heard that. And I'm not going to tell you who they hired. Yeah. The guy who did everything Lombardi said. I didn't go to him. I went to the guy they fired. And about half of us went, that's the only doctor we went to because we believed him. We knew when he said we're hurting, we could count on it. So, I mean, that's what you're dealing with here.
And that's what we're working towards from the PA standpoint, towards these protocols that are mutually agreed on by the parties to the collective bargaining agreement, where if a guy does not follow the protocols, which are published, communicated, league-wide standard, then there's ramifications and accountability mechanisms actually in place.
Well, the fact of the matter is, and this is the perfect segue here. So the Redskins are ahead at halftime against Seattle. It's the first playoff game in God knows how long, and at home, and the Redskins got a chance to advance. And this great player, Robert Griffin III, is obviously hurt, and James Andrews, a colleague of yours, a friend, one of the most notable orthopedists in the world, and Mike Shanahan, who's been on the sidelines for 30 years, he goes back in the game, and then he winds up a week later on the operating table. Some of us just can't understand how that could happen. I'm looking at you, Dr. Haas.
Here's how it can happen. It's exactly what we're talking about. The madness that went on there. I have no reason really to protect the physicians involved, but let's just say this, something was wrong with the communication in that whole situation. And there are just bits and pieces, and I don't know what the real facts are, so I can't be very definite. I'm not dodging the question, but if in fact this very experienced coach allowed this recently multiply injured, and I say multiply because this was second or third or whatever injury over a period of weeks. If this intelligent but nevertheless 22-year-old player announces that it's okay for him to go, so the coach lets him go, if that's what really happened, I think that that's not right. It's inappropriate, I think, from all sorts of levels, ranging from medical to future to economic to career to everything else. There's something wrong with the culture that allows that. The doctors weren't there. They were attending to other players. They were too far away to make a quick decision. All that stuff that goes on.
Then you had halftime. And I
Then
knew everything was going to be all right when they took him into that little shed, about a 2x4-inch shed. And I've been in your waiting room, and sometimes it feels like a 2x4-inch shed. And, what could be done there? But, the fact that, Rick, the fact of the matter is he went back out, played the game. There's been a lot of controversy. What did you think? You were covering the game.
I first of all, Mike trusted him, and I don't think he was honest with Mike, as I wouldn't have been either, because you want to play in the game, as Ray mentioned. You're not coming out of the game. They have to pull you out of the game. And to me, that responsibility would have lied on his father, Robert's father, because you got to make, if that's my kid, and I saw him run that 9-yard run dragging his leg, it's not Mike Shanahan's decision, it's not the physician, it's my kid, I'm pulling him out, especially in his first year.
Yeah, but if he's sitting in a suite upstairs, he's not.
Well, I don't care where you are. You have to, if you, the only person that cares about that kid to that level is his father. To the coach and to the physician, everybody else, he's just another guy. They'll get another one. That's how you train. That's the way the business is. So you have to, as a parent, take responsibility, even as an adult for a pro team. That's my kid. Under those circumstances, that's what would have happened. But if I'm that guy, I'm not coming out.
Monica, if you're RG3, what would you have done?
The female version of RG3 would have said, my knee really hurts. No. In all seriousness, and when it happened, I remember getting on Twitter with my friends. I'm 23. RG3 is 22. I played women's basketball, and I had to be dragged off the floor. I wasn't making the kind of money he's making. I didn't have the kind of support he has. So I get that. As a competitor, you're right. You're not coming off, especially as a leader. That's a whole nother element to it. So you want to believe you're Superman. You want to believe your powers are going to come to light. I put that on Shanahan, hands down. He's 22. He can't even quite think that far ahead at this point. I don't know. I like the idea of his dad coming down. I don't know how realistic that is. But somebody had to get to him. He's 22. Yes, he's a professional athlete, but you don't have it figured out till what, 30? You know what I mean? To me, this conversation...
At a professional level, I don't know if you ever do figure it out. You don't figure it out, because at a professional, this is the difference again. At the professional level, this is your job, and he is Superman.
Exactly.
And, I think it clearly that's the coaching, the infrastructure has to step in. There has to be systems in place.
When you wear that C on your chest,
you can't leave it to the player. There's no way in the world you can leave it to the player.
His immaturity showed, because he should have leveled with them. He was caught on tape on NBC saying he was hurt, but don't say anything. Okay, so he's busted on that. When you wear that C, then you have an obligation to guys in that huddle. I'd have been awfully mad at him if I was on their team, because you don't have the right to drag me down with you. You're supposed to say, hey, this is worse than I've ever thought.
Well, that's a whole. That's
and
a
then
very
you got to go down to Kirk Cousins.
See, now you're talking about very different.
Yeah, but I'm not on their team.
And this is the culture change that has to happen. We talk about the system where other players have to say.
If that's Joe Theismann and I'm on that field, you can't take me down with you. I'll take a bullet for you, but I'm not going down with. That's irresponsibility. But that's also being 21, 22, and he thinks he's an action hero. Well, now in this league, he took a dozen hits that were ridiculous. He didn't have to take.
He didn't need to take them.
So in this league, and I said this to Trent Williams. I said this to Trent Williams, who's a captain as well, who's older than he is. I said, what did you say to him? He said, I asked him, did you look him in the face and say, look, we need to know? I did it. He said, I'm good. I got it. So I took Trent off the older captain is supposed to say, you got to go. See, and then you can't let a guy 21 years old run your team.
You guys have been carrying this team for so long.
It doesn't matter at this point.
That's really tough because you've been there and I've been there.
But that's why when you're captain, you got to make tough decisions.
Yeah. But it was I clearly wish they pulled it.
We raised
but
this.
I know why they didn't.
I get it. I get it too.
said,
Okay, we have a question from the audience. Question.
We raised.
Just look what happened the year before when Jay Cutler pulled himself.
But he
out of-
didn't. The
out-
Bears pulled him out.
No, but he.
It
he
came
went
out
to the
that
coach
Bears told him.
because he got trashed by his teammates. He
Doesn't
got
matter.
trashed.
But that's
by
our
everybody
society.
else.
That's our society.
So
Because
we.
that's the pressure. I mean, what I'm getting at is it's exactly what you said.
Yeah.
The player's never going to say he's hurt.
Never.
And one of the problems with concussions, if the medical people don't recognize the concussion, the player's never going to tell. And the
But
story
and this
of
is
the
my
number of
point about-
players who have said, you listen to sports enough, and finally some player's going to say, "Oh yeah, I played a whole year with a concussion."
Well, they have 3 questions, by the way. They asked now.
We had this exact conversation with a
my-
panel of
my
players.
point
So.
is I think we have to take the decision out of the players' hands, and
That's
it's
what we said.
unrealistic to expect a 22-year-old competitive young man with all the juices to make that decision, and to put it in his hand is almost unacceptable, unaccountable.
Sean, you had a quick point.
We had this exact conversation in the context of informed consent with medical intervention at our annual Mackey White Traumatic Brain Injury Committee meeting, and a neurologist who serves on that committee stood up and posed the question very pointedly to one of the players on the committee. I think he was actually an executive committee member, and said, if I tell you everything you need to know about your injury, about your condition, and I give you my recommendation, it is still up to you as the patient to make the decision. And guy after guy, player after player said, no, doc, it's up to you to protect us from ourselves because we're always going to go back on the field. And that's the system that we need, and the change in culture that we need to establish, so that it is a player as patient first, provider second, player only third. And that starts with the practices, the protocols, and the other safe mechanisms.
Okay, and Mark, the parent, Rick brought in the fact that RG3's father needed to be involved. You've spent, years reporting about how parents behave with sports and their athletic children, and what do you think RG3's father would have said?
Well, I mean, what a concept to, think about a professional athlete's mother or father coming down to the field to make a personnel decision. I mean,
I say that because he's on the field before the game, after he's there anyway. So my point is that if you're going to be visible, then be visible in the moment you need it.
Do you think Shanahan would have taken him seriously though if he did say that?
If he's my kid, Shanahan wouldn't have he'd not even in the equation.
Well, we don't.
but George, I do want to make this point, and this is to Ray's point, and I actually think that Ray should be sitting down here because he's been a very active non-panelist.
Oh, wait a minute. We're paying him less to sit in the audience.
He's doing a heck of a job.
And offer his opinions.
But it is important to make this point. I think it speaks to an issue that you raised, Ray. There are 45 states now that have concussion statutes on the books that pertain to high school kids, in some instances to rec leagues as well. And in those states, there are protocols now in place. If a kid is suspected of having suffered a concussion, he cannot re-enter a game, that game or any subsequent game, until he's been evaluated by a concussion expert.
That's good.
Now, that's very constructive and helpful, but the challenge is, as Scott pointed out, there are only 40% of high schools that have an athletic trainer on the sidelines. And how many Pop Warner teams do you think are traveling with an athletic trainer? So the issue is recognized concussions. How many kids are out there at the high school level and lower playing with concussions? They're not subject to these statutes because nobody knows that they've suffered head trauma. So that's the challenge, recognition. Scott speaks to, I think, part of the answer, which is educate parents, because they're in a position to recognize changes in behavior and to, not make a diagnosis, but take their kid to a doctor because they have suspicions. But right now, by some estimates, 80% of sports concussions are unrecognized. That's a scary thought.
and half of
George,
that practice.
Yes,
Can I
Carl.
just say, I'm going to tell you a quick story, because we're talking not just about professionals here. I don't have any experience with professional football, but my son went down in a high school baseball game in Fairfax County, Virginia, and I went onto the field. And the umpire looked at me and said, "You'd better be a dad or a doctor." And I said, "I'm the dad." And they respected my right. You can't have parents on the field all the time. But in fact, they respected my right to participate in the conversation and bring my son off the field. So I would not have the guts to do that at Redskins Stadium. But I did it with my 16-year-old son in Fairfax, Virginia.
I think you would if it was your son. I mean, I think RG's father would.
Oh, no, you would. Yeah, you would. You did the right thing. Listen, grassroots football league here, we have sixth, seventh, and eighth graders. We have trainers on every game. We deal with parents first. And a young man from Baltimore dislocated his elbow in a championship game. And that truck came on the sidelines, the ambulance came down. Those parents are there. And that mother, because that kid wants his mom. You know, he's tough. But once that happened, he's crying. And the only person can meet that need is mom. And that kid, he's 12, 13 years old. And we got him through that situation. Listen, the education is what's necessary. And we have now come from an era where Ray and I played that everything was testing your manhood, where now it's sensible. And we have to discuss things. Like when Mike Vick was out for 3 weeks this year with the concussion, it was a mild tap. I looked at that and I go, are you kidding me? And I have to stop myself from going, the evaluator said he can't go back. He didn't go back for 3 weeks. And that's good. I'm happy for that. I would have hated Joe Theismann if he stayed out 3 weeks.
But the bottom line is he lost his job.
Well, I'm just saying, it would have been, it's where we come from. We're like, are you kidding me? You know, I got a kid, he's having a torn labrum surgery tomorrow. And it's been torn. And he's got bone fragments, the whole 9 years. He played with it here in Maryland, with a brace on for 2 years. Now he's getting it fixed. I think he's an idiot to get it done because he's done playing football, but he wants to get it done. You know, and that's what happens with this game. It's weird.
Well, just one quick comment on this issue of evolution. So you guys are talking about how it's evolved from.
Oh, it's big time.
It's changing, but even the comment of 45 states now adopt what this Lystead-like law, and the idea is understand signs and symptoms. Coaches, parents, and players all have to read the signs and symptoms, again, CDC-based, understand if you even suspect a concussion, you take them out. So when in doubt, sit them out, and you can't return to play until a licensed healthcare professional returns you to play. That is good, and most states are only scholastic. Talk about steps at a time. What we've just done in the state of Indiana, and it's just passed the Senate side, we're trying to get it through the House side now, is say that's not good enough. Now you've got to take that Lystead-like law, let's call it the concussion law, from the scholastic level, push it down to the non-scholastic, basically the rec or youth levels. And it's not enough just to hope that the coach understands the signs and symptoms, or if you're really lucky, players are now engaged in the process and they're saying, wait a minute, he's not right, he's got to get off. And this is a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, we got to get it down to that level, which is not easy. But on top, we said you have to have certification. No coach should walk on a field without being certified. And the senators and everybody at this state level all want it to be all sports. So I can't speak to the other sports. I can speak to what I control. I have a nationally accredited coaching education program, the only one in football, the only one in youth sports, except for soccer. I can speak to that, third-party accredited. I have this new program called Heads Up Football. It's $5 a coach. Everything else is $20 or substantially higher. I said this, and there's an entire membership goes with it with practice plans, a program called Levels of Contact, which you have to reduce helmet contacts in practices. If you have a 2-hour practice, you can't actually have live contact more than 30 minutes. There's a whole progression to it. There's an age-based progression of teaching that we have. It's pretty sophisticated stuff. But we have to be much more stringent in terms of setting the standards and the requirements. It's flying through the Senate, or did fly through the Senate. Now it's going to the House. Now, hopefully, that is the next step in the process, that we go to state by state and say, okay, we appreciate 45 of you have taken this modest and arguably good step of creating a concussion standard, but now you have to add education to it. You have to start adding levels of contact requirements. These are the things that we have to work through collectively, and ultimately, again, parents, players, and coaches have to embrace this.
Yeah, when a professional team like the Washington Nationals last year shut down Steven Strasburg after 160 innings. They were criticized throughout baseball for being overly cautious, not realizing that this is their chance perhaps to get to the World Series and win the World Series, and they came under a lot of criticism. Monica, you've been an athlete at Georgetown and through high school. What did you think of that particular decision?
I was sort of baffled by it because I didn't follow baseball that intensely, but I did read about it and I followed it. And actually, following RG3's injury, Adam Kilgore did a great piece comparing the two incidents. Strasburg is another one. He's young, right? So everybody's upset in the time being because you look at what could be potentially, but the guy's going to have a life after his career. And I think that's the hard part that we don't want to swallow. We want to deal with the right now. We want to deal with this next play, what could be, instead of looking at the bigger picture. And it's not easy because you are competitive. Your juices are going. You want to win. But, I mean, that season ends, though.
Mark?
You want me to talk about Tommy John surgery?
Yeah, talk about Tommy John surgery and talk about Steven Strasburg.
Look, I am, unfortunately, I have some expertise with Tommy John surgery. Just very briefly, my son was a youth rec baseball pitcher, and I was the coach. And I really liked watching him strike out those other kids. You know why? Because, well, we won when he pitched, and I was like an inch and a half taller when he was striking out those other kids. I was a great parent those days. And so, at 11, I wasn't really paying attention to whether he was pitching 4 months a year or 7 or 9 or 14 months a year. And when he was 18, I noticed because he ruptured the ligament, his ulnar collateral ligament. And I thought I was helping him reach his potential as an athlete. No. I prevented him from reaching his potential as an athlete. So that's, we talk about James Andrews, the surgeon, the super surgeon. Half of the patients that come to see James Andrews for Tommy John surgery are high school students. High school students. I interviewed Frank Jobe, who developed Tommy John surgery in 1974 to save the career of Tommy John, a professional baseball pitcher. Frank Jobe, who's now in his mid-80s, he said, I feel like Dr. Frankenstein. Never did it occur to me that this operation would be used on high school kids. I was saving the career of a professional baseball pitcher, not a high school kid. So that's where we are now, where you have parents who will say, look, he can just have Tommy John surgery. In 18 months, he'll be as good as new. So
What happened to your son?
My son went to GW, ended up playing club baseball, but he lost 2 years out of his life and had the surgery. Like you, Doc, I said to my son, you're probably not going to pitch competitively again. And you're putting yourself through something that's grueling, that will change your life. Why are you doing that? And, he said something to me that I'll never forget. He said, when I'm a dad, I want to be able to do what you did in the front yard and throw a ball across the yard to my son. And I can't do that right now. And I said, schedule the surgery.
Yeah. Now, how did you, Dr. Haas, how did you deal with parents?
Well, I think it starts
Present
with,
company excluded, of course.
Absolutely. I think you have to start with the biology. These tendons and ligaments and bones don't know anything about the motor that's driving everything else. It takes a certain amount of time for injuries to heal, no matter what. There's some outliers that make it. Mr. Peterson came back to having an all-star year this year, way ahead of the usual schedule. But in general, I think it starts with that. There's healing time for injuries. And for the most part, you really can't beat the game. All the stem cells and all the human growth hormone and testosterone and everything else, still, the biology holds. It takes a certain amount of time for injuries to heal. And a lot of these conditions are because everybody tried to beat the game. Your elbow doesn't know if the World Series starts next week or not. It takes a certain amount of time for it to heal. And I think that trying to cut those corners has caused a lot of trouble. I think that it's good and bad news that we've gotten so good as surgeons. If 20% of the people that had knee ligament reconstructions or elbow reconstructions went back to play and 80% didn't ever go back to play, you wouldn't see all this surgery going on. We've gotten good enough that the results are much better. Now everybody thinks, so I get hurt, what the hell, I'll just get it fixed, I'm not really right, but if it polishes off, then, they can fix me, because look at A, B, and C that came back. That's a big issue. So I think that it's good that the techniques exist, that high percentage of success, but none of this replaces common sense, which is established healing times, and you can't beat that game. Go with that, and you have to just turn it off. That's the problem with getting the emotionally involved people making decisions, whether it's a parent, whether it's a coach, whether it's who else. At one of the great moments of my career, got thrown off the field by an 8-year-old's mother. This kid got smashed in a little pee-wee football game, and I was there with my son, was playing. I went out on the field and thought, what's going on? And this woman comes from the other sideline and says, "Who are you?" I said, "Well, I'm Dr. Haas, my kid plays on the team, this or that." And she said, "I didn't ask you to come out here." And she reaches down, I swear, slaps the kid and says, "Get up and play, be a man," and says to me, "Thank you very much. If I need you, I'll call you." Okay,
Wait a minute, did you bill her?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay, questions from the audience. David Steele, Sporting News columnist.
You were just about to make a point, and then everyone started talking about it. You said words, but he lost his job. About, I think it was Michael Vick. And I know that's got to be a major concern, and I was wondering what Doc thought about that, and Monica thought about that. The idea of not telling, coaches, your own teammates, the medical people, when you're hurt, not giving them all the information about how badly you're hurt, because realistically, at every level, at every sport, men's and women's, you can lose your job, your spot on the team, your starting job or something when you're hurt. How do you deal with that? And I guess everybody in the panel could respond to this.
Well, I'll just say
that
this.
has to really drastically affect how everybody makes the decision.
Other than quarterbacks, for the most part, in the National Football League, money's not guaranteed. The NBA, you see guys showing up to camp, "Oh, by the way, I got a fracture." It's calm because they got money guaranteed. The most physical and violent sport doesn't. So when you heard Tom Brady, he acted like he was about to get the Nobel Peace Prize for redoing his contract. He was brilliant. They backloaded. He got $57 million guaranteed, and he helped his team stay relevant by being able to re-sign players. But he got $57 guaranteed. Well, the average guy in the National Football League doesn't have guaranteed money. So when this physician, scientist, chemist, God comes up to you, all you're thinking about is, how do I keep my spot? How do I stay on this team? What do I have to do to win? And until they get the structure right, where your money is guaranteed to a degree, then people will be more honest with you. And in football, never going to happen for the rank and file, because football is so categorized. It's the quarterbacks, maybe a couple stars here or there. Then the rest of it is just be replaced instantaneously. And so it's a dime a dozen, and you go into this deal fighting to stay in as long as possible. And we never talked about practice. You're talking about the concussions you get to see. They may take bull in the ring out. They may take the Oklahoma drill out of football, which we all did over and over and over. But there's still going to be collisions for tight ends and receivers going down the middle, get hit by secondary guys, natural collisions, and people are knocked out. And they'll come by and go, how many fingers do I have up? And whatever you say, based on what practice is going in, you're good, let's go. And you know it. That's the way it has been. And so until the league and physicians have more bearing, more weight, then it's never going to change. All of this is window dressing.
I would absolutely agree with that. And one of the biggest focuses of this CBA negotiation was actually reducing the number of practices in the offseason, the number of contacts allowed in the offseason. No more two-a-days, no more contact practices once a week after week 11 throughout the season. They're estimating now that as a result of the rule changes, which have trickled down to a certain extent, the average player will save at least 10,000 hits in his career. And that's
Sean, what's the average length of a player's career?
the average career right now, they're still saying is about 3.6 years, close to 4, but that changes by position. A running back, for instance, is 2.8 years, which is why when you start thinking about a 3.5-year career, let's add 2 games to the end of the season to make the average career length 2.8, and therefore nobody vests with post-career health insurance. You start to think about how these negotiations actually
like a
factor. Yeah, well, there you go.
No, he's right.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true, and
You had, when they retire, 2 years out, 75% unemployed running back.
Yeah, and a lot of being done through various life cycle initiatives and things that we're starting to implement now because this new CBA has given us the power to do just that. But to speak to the guaranteed money piece, it is with a career with 100% injury rate. I mean, there are 4,500 injuries last season, and there are 1,800 players, so that puts it in perspective. But at least in terms of what the union is doing what it can, guaranteed injury money. If you get injured and a guy cuts you, you are now entitled to 50% of your salary up to, I think it's $1.5 million in year 1. Now there's an extended injury protection guarantee that if you're cut while you're injured, you get 30% of your salary up to $500,000. So we're trying to make progress in the right direction there.
Monica, you had a point.
I have a question, point, kind of all that. Kind of in conjunction with Michael's question, but kind of to Doc. So go back to RG3 real quick. Because I was such a team player, I said to one of my friends, if I was Kirk Cousins, I would have been mad. Because to me, it says, I don't trust you enough to get this done as my teammate that's been preparing. Am I off on that?
No, that's been thought of, and that's the competitive part of football. In the quarterback position and the way it has been developed. You mentioned the 2.2 years for running backs, least protected position on the field. They get killed, and nobody says a word. The quarterback gets touched. And people, they act of Congress goes out there. We got to change this, we got to change that, because they have so few of them that are competent. And they understand the game's about scoring. So the defensive guys get taken advantage of by these rule changes to enhance scoring as manipulation for the game itself. And so that's business. I'm not mad at that. But when you don't have guaranteed money and a man comes up to you and here's the go, hey, stud, how you feel? Stud. You're hurt. Hey, horse, how are you, baby? You good? Can you go? And it's all suggestive. It's all suggestive. How you feel today? Same as I did yesterday. It's just like this RG3. You hear it. When you hear them talk about, oh, he's doing great. But Fred Davis, it was kind of, he had a very serious injury. What? He had an Achilles. He's coming back. And they make Robert's injury seem like it's amputation. That thing's done. It's done a lot. He'll be fine. But he'll be fine in time, naturally, not based on what they're trying to get him in a schedule. So the NBC, ABC, and CBS, who can get the game? See, this is about the schedule coming out. All of this has reasons, and I'm not mad at that. I'm a capitalist. But let's be honest,
Right.
And let's say it for what it's about. And what's confusing to me is when we talk about pros and youth.
Yeah.
Because they're day and night.
Right.
I mean, this is.
So this past summer, my sister was playing summer league basketball for her high school, and she got an elbow in her temple. She was knocked unconscious for 20 minutes. So she's in the middle of the court. She has parents and everything looking over her to see if she wakes up. So she finally wakes up and gets carried off the court. She's taking a concussion test, and miraculously, I don't know how, but she got passed through it by her coaches and I guess by the referees. And her coach, I guess after the first half ended, tried to send her back in the game. And my older sister's at the game and has to send me a text message while I'm at work saying, "Oh, Christina got knocked unconscious, but her coach is trying to send her back in the game." I had to immediately call my sister and demand her to remove her from the game, walk on the court during the middle of play, to remove her from the game because my mother and my father didn't want to take her on. And later that night, I had to yell at my sister saying, take her to the hospital because she has it. Like, I guarantee you she has a concussion. So she goes to the hospital. Obviously, she finds out she has a concussion. She's out for 8 weeks because they didn't want to like pull her from the game immediately. Can you guys speak on that? Like with you, like shouldn't coaches and shouldn't referees be trained and have to be certified in all states about your concussions, about all injuries like that?
Well, I think this speaks to what was brought up about the 45 states having these concussion laws, and I can't recall which states are left. There's obviously a select few, but anyway, yeah, they're responsible. And this whole liability. The thing that's really changing now, especially college below, is the liability issue. And I mean, literally, coaches are going to be in big trouble. I mean, the really significant cases are the 5 concussion game in Worcester, Mass, the Pop Warner League, the outside the lines of the piece on Donovan Hill. I mean, this poor young man tragically paralyzed playing football, and you heard his coach say, no, we didn't teach little Donovan to tackle with his head down, and Donovan's saying, well, he did. And then his assistant coach comes out and said, actually, we did teach him that. Then you hear the assistant say, but you know what, I've never been taught to coach football. I just do what I was taught. The whole system's flawed. And here's this poor kid who's paralyzed. And so there are new systems in place. The Lysted-Light concussion law, the responsibility of coaches, parents, and players now to understand what those signs and symptoms are and come out. I mean, first of all, the fact that you could even consider taking a kid who's actually knocked out, which is like something like 10% at most of concussions are actually when you lose consciousness. I mean, that's an immediate sign of concussion. You should be immediately out of the game.
Just a couple of things come to mind. Everything that's being talked about, or just about everything in terms of rectifying the situation, nobody mentioned money yet. All this stuff costs, and that has to come from somewhere. All of the trainers, it should start with certified trainers for schools, these programs for coaches,
But not just football.
et cetera. No, not
Like there
just
were
football
11.
at all.
There's 11 concussions in the past week in the National Hockey League.
That's
you
right.
Can believe that?
That's right. And the National Hockey League, by the way, started the concussion testing program, the preseason testing, and this was like 10, 12 or so from the University of Pittsburgh, who's done great work in this area and continues to do great work. Doing baseline tests at the beginning of the year, written tests, simple, on all players. And if they sustained a head injury of some sort during the season, they were retested before they were allowed to go back playing. Now, that's become much more sophisticated. I think we should have a little audience participation here. This is one of the key tests that's been done for years and years. Now is being refined, etc. You get hit in the head doing whatever you're doing, tiddlywinks, football, basketball, whatever it is. The doctor's going to say, what quarter is it? Where are you playing? What's the score? How many fingers am I holding up? And then they're going to give you this test, which you can all do for yourself right now. The classical test is called serial sevens. I'm sure you've done this and you've done this. Count backwards from 100 as fast as you can by sevens. Just to yourself. Take a minute and do that.
This is a fine university.
Nobody in this room has, I'm assuming nobody here has a recent concussion, but try it. 100 by sevens backwards as fast as you can. And that this became one of the real standards for deciding whether you were good enough to go back. It was a sliding scale of what constituted a good enough response to the serial sevens.
Okay.
That's exactly what I mean.
Okay, we have a question over here on
You better
this side.
call the rescue squad. We've got 100 people here that have concussions. Yeah.
Question.
In like Baltimore County High School, I know that what you guys said, only 12 out of 24 trainers are in each high school. So, like, without the third party of a trainer, is it possible, like, is it practical to actually, like, get away from the competitiveness and will to win of the coaches to make the safety call? Like, is that, or do you think there has to be a trainer to make the call?
I mean, the coaches have to take responsibility. Again, the parents have to take responsibility, and the players have to take responsibility. One of the dynamics that's actually happening right now is younger kids are actually saying to their parents, I don't know if I want to play that particular sport. And it isn't just football. They're actually saying it's lacrosse, it's hockey. They're saying, I don't want to play it because I'm scared of concussions. So a lot of people put the emphasis on, well, the parents are either telling them to do it, or the parents are the ones scared, saying maybe I shouldn't let my kid play. It's actually trickling out of the kids as well.
Scott, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Are your coaches good enough?
First of all, we don't run leagues, so they're not.
Yeah, but
our
you-
coaches.
you
No,
sort of-
no. The answer is no. We need to improve the quality of coaching. Period. There's no question about it. And I would, Kayla, I would argue that could be. I mean, the kinds of things you're talking about, the safety measures and the changing of the culture. I mean, you could argue this goes all the way up to potentially NFL coaches. I mean, they have to change how they're doing things. So at the youth level, they're not.
Talking youth level.
Yeah, at the youth level, they need to get better as it relates to fundamentals. You have, unfortunately, youth coaches who want to teach the spread offense to 8-year-olds. Okay, this kind of stuff, right? It's absolutely ridiculous, and that has to change. And even at the high school level, where they say they're paid and all of this, they need to improve things, and we have to change the culture, and that's why we do the things we're trying to do, which, by the way, is not easy. We don't have mandate authority, so we can't go out and say you have to do this. That's the irony of this. That's what we're trying to get to parents, saying you're the ones who have to make sure that coach who's coaching your most precious possession, it has to be certified. I mean, I just had Coach Coughlin from New York Giants say that at the Combine. He said no parent should allow their kid, this is just talking football, to go on the field and coach their kid without being USA Football certified, period. I mean, that's one of the top coaches in all of football.
Mark, you got a point?
For this recent book with Dr. Cantu, I had the opportunity to interview Tom Brady Sr., very interesting guy. His son, who some of you know, did not play a down of tackle football until his sophomore year in high school. The reason is quite evident, and that is Tom Brady Sr.'s belief was that tackle football was too dangerous. There was very little awareness of concussion and head trauma at the time. He told me, I didn't want my kid walking off the field with a broken arm or broken leg. Football was just inherently too dangerous, in my view, for a small child. So I'm going to make a heretical suggestion here and ask maybe the panel and the audience to respond. What would be lost if football for kids until age 14 was limited to flag? You could practice the skills of tackle football. You could wear a helmet and play flag football. But the contact that is inherent in tackle football
Doc,
was deferred until 14. What would be lost as a society?
It would be, because I also agree, but only because of the coaching, that, and being a part of a youth league, it's about the coaching. Parents don't mind evaluating the teachers in academia for their kids. They're going to evaluate that. They want to make sure that the teachers are qualified. But a guy could be anything as a coach. They do no background. They do very little background. And if he sounds right, he can talk his way into it. So I could go for flag. Thank God I didn't have to do it. But if I had no other choice, I play flag, love flag. Flag with pads would be cool until high school. I could go with that because there's so many kids that get lost in the shuffle of this that it's just unfair if you're not one of the guys that could survive it. I mean, I see people get physically abused, and it's pitiful over the years. And so, yeah, I'd go for that. I'd support it.
Okay. Scott, what do you think?
First of all, we recommend any parent your first touch point is flag. We believe that's a great way to enter the sport. I don't care if you're 6 years old or 10 years old or 12 years old. The fact is there are 3 million kids playing organized tackle football right now. My responsibility is to create a better, safer environment for them. So I believe that there's a segment of society that needs contact sports. And whether that, again, is lacrosse, it's one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing, whether it's hockey, whether it's football, this sport clearly isn't for everybody. I think there are kids that need an outlet like this. But most importantly, I feel strongly that we can make this game better and safer. I really genuinely believe that. And I think, again, if we put the right systems in place, and I'll give you one other quick example. The largest provider of property and casualty insurance in the world, AIG, insurance companies speak from the wallet. It's real simple. You reduce our risk, we'll do something for you. We'll help pass the savings on. They now stand behind USA Football and Heads Up Football program and said, we will give you the most comprehensive insurance program for the least cost. Rarely do you find those two together. Most comprehensive for least cost. That is the new model because of Heads Up Football. They believe enough in what we're doing to change the culture of football. They're going to stand behind us and give us the best insurance program you can give to a collision sport. I think that's a pretty.
Putting in requirements on it.
I'm sorry.
Are they putting?
You have to.
Putting requirements
Yeah, you have to practice Heads Up Football only. So you have to be certified. You have to have a player safety coach. Your parents have to be part of the solution. And I won't go into all the details, but yeah, you're right. They're putting requirements on it, but that is helping. That will help change the culture because now there's an economic incentive.
Monica, what about for women?
What about women?
Yeah, but you know, women. There are more women playing sports now than ever before, and many of the sports are contact sports, and there are many knee injuries, ACLs, much more for women than men even. What are the concerns for women?
Well, I think it's similar to along the lines of this concussion discussion. It's about the education. I mean, I can remember going through college and our strength and conditioning coach, look, y'all are more likely to blow your knee out than the guys are. This is what you need to do. This is the proper way to jump. This is the proper way to land. So it's just about education and being taught. I think, I don't know, and we had this conversation about like gymnastics and skating and the things that women go through. I doubt that it'll ever kind of garner the type of attention that we see given to football, but I mean, there's a nasty underbelly to sports, period, like men or women, you know? When you're pushing your body to those limits, regardless of what you're doing, you run a risk. So I think as an athlete, you kind of know what you're getting involved with when you step to the plate and decide that you want to play. In the case of these NFL guys, they really know because of all the science and stuff backing them. And I think, to me, in the midst of all this conversation, and maybe it's because I write to high school athletes, LeVar Arrington said it when he was here. The chances you make it to the NFL, are like getting struck by lightning, you know? So I just question pushing these kids at such young ages for what? So very few make it to this elite level. And even at the elite level, we're suggesting that your dad needs to come down and get you off the field. So can you imagine, you know, what needs to be done on the youth level? So I think at some point you sit back and you got to be honest. It's not necessarily worth me crushing this kid's body at 8 because this is not the next Torrey Smith. Like, it's just not.
There are 20,000 5- and 6-year-olds playing Pop Warner football, tackle. 20,000. 20,000.
All right, more questions. Yes, sir.
I would suggest that you can't change culture without legislation. And the point that we've been coming back to, 40% of schools have trainers on the sideline. Where is the American Academy of Pediatricians and the National Association of Athletic Trainers? Where are they? Why aren't they saying you can't operate sports without a trainer on the field?
Well, they do say it. I mean, like the District of Columbia, I remember there was maybe 10, 15 years ago, they didn't play for, what was it, 3-4 weeks. Remember, because they didn't have, you had to have a certified trainer and an ambulance at each field, and they couldn't afford it, so they didn't play for, for a month. And they have said it, and they have been, requests, and there have been mandates. But the fact of the matter is, and this has been said by everybody, the parents want the games, the kids want the games, the coaches want the games.
Well, then a game doesn't start without a trainer on the field.
But they,
They're actually, no, that's it. I mean, it's a very good point. And Dr. Haas mentioned, I mean, there's the economic question comes up. And the other thing that is important to state is there actually are not enough athletic trainers just to cover all youth football games. So it's not that we don't need them, and it's not that they shouldn't be there. Potentially it's not that there shouldn't be some sort of a legislative mandate, but I mean, a series of things go in. Just think about, this all started with helmets, right? Everybody jumped on the helmet bandwagon. Got to have a new helmet. Finally, we came to the realization there's no such thing as a concussion-resistant helmet. Then I think it went to baseline testing. That was the next silver bullet. That was going to solve it all. Then it was I don't know what else. But there was, now what they're asking, this is just youth football. We want you to have the latest technology in helmets. We want you to have all your kids baseline tested. We want to have all your helmets reconditioned. You got all the latest mouthpieces. You have to have all the background checks. And oh, by the way, I'm saying, and I'm screaming it, you better have a coach that's certified. All of a sudden, to play football, it's $1,000. Now, you could argue maybe that's what it needs to be, and maybe it shouldn't be 3 million kids playing. Maybe it should be flag. Maybe it should be 500 kids. But then the whole idea of we're going to have an economic disadvantage. You're going to say these kids can't play because they can't afford it. I mean, there's a lot into this issue, well beyond just the medical side. This is I always talk about it. It's a very complex issue, very complex.
Yes, sir.
I coached high school football for 25 years, starting back in the 70s, and probably went to well over 100 coaches' clinics and everything else. And it wasn't until I was out about 10 years and my son decided he wanted to play football, and I decided, just like Rick said, I'm going to make sure he's coached right. And then I went and my organization said, despite the amount of years and experience that you have, you need to have this training. And I went through all of your training, and it is wonderful. And I do think it's necessary, and I do think it's there. And I think the problem in sports is we're training all of these coaches at the bottom. But the more you move toward the top, whether it's high school, where coaches are required to take, care and prevention of injury courses, I would say very few college coaches ever do anything related to studying about injuries and the impact of injuries. And then when you get to the pros, I imagine probably no pro coach has probably done that in 20 years. So, when back when they were a grad assistant or something, they had to do something like that. So my point is, at the lowest levels of football, we probably have the best training of coaches and the best awareness of injuries. And as we move up, we probably have less and less and less. And part of that is because dollars are more important than health and safety at the top. But, my point is that we need to get this same level of training and awareness to grow through the whole process, because I think that the coaches of the Redskins or the Cowboys, whoever, need to have the same awareness of injuries and be cognizant of the care for the product that they have. Otherwise, football is going to be eaten up, because you mentioned 2,000 athletes that are former athletes that are currently looking at litigation. That number is likely to grow more than.
I think it is more than 2,000, and there is litigation.
Exponentially, when you mark it out there, that's going to grow exponentially if we don't start doing something to train people more.
Here's another one to be a killjoy. The National Football League fines guys for not having their socks up, but yet they don't care, they don't wear pads. Now you explain to me the rationale in that Frank Gore was fined $10,000 because his socks didn't come up to his knees. He had no knee pads on, no thigh pads. So the league has at least somebody had to bring fire out and say, we're going to fine guys next year. Everybody has to wear pads next year. Yeah, they're going back to the way it used to be, the way the game started. How could you play without pads? That was a whole idea that slipped by me. Again, it's not the kids, it's the adults. That's the problem. The problem is that you got to get the adults to structure the thing in a way that protects kids and adults. And I hate talking about pros and youth, because their day and night have nothing in common.
But here's the paradigm issue. It's the players that were saying they don't want to wear the pads.
They don't have a voice. You can't. Now you letting Robert tell you
I'm
you
just
can
saying,
go play.
but what happened until someone stepped in and said, no, you're going to wear the pads. And I'm not defending the NFL by any stretch of the
That's my whole point.
The players are saying it. And then the influence issue happens. Now all of a sudden the college players
I
are
don't
not
listen
wearing
to
them.
players. I don't listen to
The
kids.
high school
That's like
players,
asking your
youth
son for advice.
Yeah.
No,
you're right.
All right, more questions.
This
more
is
questions.
not a democracy.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Okay, she has a question.
Hi. My question's a little different. It's kind of like where you draw the line. Are you going to go to the doctor every single time you tweak your knee? My brother plays high school basketball, and he was in a tournament in LA last year, and he landed on his knee funny, and it hurt him, so he sat out the rest of the tournament. And then he said it got better, so he wasn't going to run to the doctor. And then it it was like stable, but it wasn't getting worse. Like, okay, I'll go. And it ended up he tore his meniscus. But he wasn't in excruciating pain. He played a little bit. Where do you draw the line? My knee's been hurting me for a month. I don't know why. I play tennis, but I'm not like a professional athlete. I don't know. Should I go to the doctor? Like, I don't know.
You might have.
Well, doctor?
One of my greatest professors told the class one time, when all else fails, think. And there's a little element of that. What makes sense? The answer is there's no answer. And even if it is a high school kid or younger or so forth, somebody needs to be watching more closely the younger they are. But at some point, it's kind of self-regulating to a degree with younger kids. When they can't go, okay, there are very few really young kids, even up to high school, that can go back and keep playing with some injury that's going to have a prolonged or permanent effect. It's a little different at that age. Fortunately, as I mentioned before, kids' bodies are much more forgiving. But to directly answer your question, part of the game is not running to the doctor every time something happens. And so competent observers, coaches and parents that see him limping, favoring his arm, something happened to his pitches, all of a sudden he can't get it 3/4 to the plate. Okay, you're done. But one thing, if I could just add this, I think there's a huge issue that hasn't been touched. What's the difference if you get a concussion and you're goofy for 3 minutes and you have a headache and you're a little dizzy for a while and maybe 2 days later you're okay? How bad is that? It's not great, but that's not the point. The point is what happens down the road. If it was proven without question that there was no long-term problem from getting hit in the head a few times and having several concussions, we probably wouldn't be having most of this discussion. It's what happens down the road. The answer is nobody knows yet, because it's going to take 25 years of careful study of people that had a series of concussions at age 20 to see what happened when they were 40, 50, 60. So I just think as part of this, it's the long-term effects that are the big deal, and that's the most difficult to study.
I think that's the critical point. Sorry, just quickly. That's a critical point, is that from I guess where I sit and the parents I talk to, and obviously people who love football, our positioning to commissioners across the country, to high school coaches, to youth coaches, listen, you have to look a parent in the eye, and you have to say, we're going to create a better, safer environment to look out for your kid. Because you want to let the kid play. You're making that choice. Again, it's a personal, subjective decision. We want you to be more informed. We want you to read Dr. Cantor's book and be fully informed, because he's a brilliant man. He's offering some compelling considerations. There's also other things to look at as well, but the most important thing from our standpoint is improve yourself, make sure you're properly prepared to go out in that field and teach this game. Look a parent in the eye and make sure you're telling them that this is the circumstances, and we're going to work to provide a better, safer environment. Those things are critical, I think, as we go forward in evaluating, because the evidence-based data is not there yet.
Professor?
We've got to do something proactive in the meantime.
Thanks, George. I just wonder if any of you think that you talked about the need for education, and I wonder if any of you think that there might be a gap in how sport administrators and sport leaders are trained in this country. It seems the model primarily is purely a business model. It's about marketing and it's about finance. And in fact, many people espouse the model that the most effective sport leaders, sport managers, are trained with MBAs. And somehow, as a professor in kinesiology, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Certainly they need leadership, and certainly need organizational theory, but it seems to me there should be some integration with basic elements of sports science, because if it's purely a business model, it seems to me it's leaders working within sport, but I don't see those people really as sport leaders. It would be like somebody trying to run General Motors who knows nothing about the automobile, but they know basically about the business of sport. And then if influence comes from top down, I just wonder if anybody has any thoughts about that.
Can I respond to that? Great question. There are two, I think, fundamental changes in youth sports over the last 30 years. One is the age of entry. And when you and I were kids, the typical starting point for a kid in youth sports was 8 or 9. Now, if your dad was the coach, it was always your dad, never your mom, you could get in at 8. Otherwise, it was 9. That's mid-career for a kid athlete these days. I mean, there are leagues now for 18-month-old children, organized leagues. That's one. The
Auto races? What are they doing?
They're for-profit soccer leagues for kids 18 months. The other big change is specialization. You know, again, when we were kids, you played, you know, soccer in the fall, basketball, baseball. That was typical. Now, you have kids identified by coaches or parents as having a particular skill at age 7 or 8 in one sport, and the kid is doing that all year round. I know a little about that because I've got my hand up. What's driving this? In part, it's parental ambition for a kid. You can coach a 9 and 10-year-old up to a level far exceeding what we were at our comparable age. But the health consequences when that kid gets to be 14 or 15 and is playing only that one sport are serious. But the point I'd like to make is a lot of this is driven by commerce. There are lots of people in the business of training kids to be super 11-year-old soccer players. And that's why the status quo is so powerful and difficult to change, because there are lots of economic established interests in this system that we've developed that has nothing to do with the developmental interests of kids, but is profitable, is resulting in a business model for lots of people who are, that's what they do for a living.
We got time for a couple more questions.
We took this gentleman, we took him out of the unified school districts when we killed physical education.
Yeah.
The strongest male and female influence in school when I came out was a PE coach, male and female. Some rocket scientists decided that they didn't need to have them in the curriculum. We never had metal detectors leading into our junior high schools. We took that forceful individual out that made you do pull-ups that you hated, chin-ups that you despised, made you run and you hated it. But the physical development is that you were less prone to injury and accident because you played a number of different sports and you were physically active. We're taking vegetables now who sit around and stare at monitors, and then you throw them outside in certain seasons. They don't even want to be outdoors. And then we put them in contact sports. It's cruel. It's flat out cruel to this generation of marshmallows that we're developing based on the fact that we've taken that curriculum out of schools. And I think it's a sin.
People devalue it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, a couple more questions. If you got.
No, because you were a participant.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about the thumbers who
Also,
sit around
your
and
parents
play
won't
games.
let you be a marshmallow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where do you see the role of sort of increased enforcement of penalties and fines and changing culture?
Who's going to enforce them? Who's enforcing them? That's a good question, but
It would be like the NFL, Doc.
Oh, no, nobody. NFL, you do what they allow you to do. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. The NFL is so big, and it is the #1 sport in the world, and rightfully so. And I'm pleased that the PA is doing a great job in bringing about some changes now. I really am. I think they've done a great job. There's a long way to go. But a guy just got fined for socks and no pads last year. So they got a lot of work to do.
Well, if they find somebody $50,000 for a hit on a defenseless receiver, and the person they're fining is making $4 million a year, it's not that big a deal.
And this is a world where you're fining players to prevent quote unquote hazardous occupational occurrences, injuries. but then they turn around and fight on every single workers' comp case. You know, this is a world where actually the workers' comp carriers and the teams who all of their workers' comp premium payments are actually covered under the player's side of the salary cap under the CBA. But they still turn around and fight every single workers' comp case. So it needs to be a larger cultural shift on the employer's side to actually prioritize these issues, to invest in research that's player-specific as opposed to general population research, to put the focus more on education and less on finding the players.
That's a tough call, though, because this gets back to the earlier discussion. It shows how complicated. Put me in, coach. I'm okay. Let me play. Let me play. We're saying, no, somebody's got to take care of them. Somebody's got to be careful they don't go back and injure themselves, etc. The players want to play, don't want to hear about it, sit on the bench. Then down the road, they've got problems. And now, wait a minute. I went out and played and got hurt. I want to get paid for it. Well, wait a minute. You're the one that said, put me in. I'll decide whether I'm hurt. It's my body, etc. I'm not advocating either way, but this is a giant problem financially. There's one word that describes all professional sports: eyeballs.
What?
Eyeballs. How many people are watching the games, TV, in person, etc.? And every single decision that's made, medical and otherwise, has some element of eyeballs in it. Public relations, marketing, but basically eyeballs. That's what makes it so difficult to litigate, negotiate, argue, whatever, and come out with the right answers. And that's why it's so hard. It's not... There's an obvious solution to concussions, but nobody will do anything about it.
But that's the appeal of the sport, that it's violent, but also it's also the disadvantage of the sport too. And
yes.
People love it because
that's
it is.
Exactly right.
And players love it, but at the same time there are going to be consequences. I mean, people are going to get hurt.
That's
right.
We
all know that. We know that going into it.
Yeah.
So to me, it's
that's what makes it so complicated.
It's impacting the outcomes of an inherently dangerous workplace as opposed to impacting the workplace itself. Once you have established that basic standard that the employer has to provide a safe working environment.
The employer has to recognize.
Yes.
And they haven't in the past because they hadn't had to. Now we know there are going to be ongoing issues. And they're going to have
the answer.
It's going to be expensive. But
I think this is a perfect way to end a wonderful session. Before we go, I want to thank each and every panelist. It was enlightening and very, very educational. And I want to invite the audience to some of our Povich Center events that are coming up. On March 27th, we have a panel on diversity in the sports media. On April 27th at Maryland Day, we're doing a panel on the new changes in media, sports media. April 13th, this is really important, we have a workshop for all high school and college students around the area, not just at the University of Maryland, but from around the area, and we have professionals come in all day. It's free, breakfast and lunch included. And finally, on March 9th, we have an internet sports writing seminar with Dan Steinberg. So it's on a Saturday. And again, thank you very, very much. You've been a wonderful audience.